Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso Mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be producing a very nice fireworks simulation. We're going to be doing this using a combination of Expresso and thinking particles along with a tracer object. And as this is my first tutorial with the brand new Cinema 4D 2024, we will also be using Pyro because we can now apply this to particles. That's something that we couldn't do before. That's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll start by bringing in 3 nulls. The first we'll call TP, and the second TP1. And finally the third we'll call Expresso. We'll give it an Expresso tag. We've got our window open and we're ready to start doing some work. Make the window a little smaller. And we're ready to start thinking about what we need to bring in. Now, the first thing we need to do is bring in TP. And this will be the null that controls the orientation of the particle storm node that I'm actually going to bring in. It will control the actual position and rotation of the P-storm. So let's get on with that. We can say global position at the output stage, and we can also say global matrix to control both the position and rotation. We can then bring in a P-storm. So thinking particles, generator, P-storm. We've got the emitter position. We want the emitter alignment, and we can plumb these two in accordingly. Now, we want TP for a start. If we go into our coordinates, we want to rotate this around its rotation P by 90 degrees. So we'll do that, and we've got the Z-axis pointing along the world's Y-axis. So we're pointing towards the sky, which is what we want. If we just run the sequence, we can see that the emitter immediately rotates by 90 degrees and starts emitting particles upwards. That's exactly what we want. Moving on from here, we can think about what we're going to do within this P-storm. Now, this is the P-storm that's going to emit the initial fireworks. So what we need to do is work with our count value first. The circle is fine for the type, and the birth type is count, so that's fine. We can make our count value much smaller. We'll say 4, because we don't want many fireworks, we just want a few every so often. The lifespan, we can take that down to 60, and we'll give it a variation of 20%. The speed, well, they need to be quite fast because they're fireworks, so we'll say 1500 for the speed. And we'll give that a variation too, and we'll make it a variation of 20% once again. The size, I'm simply going to make this 1. We'll leave the variation as it is because we don't need to touch that. The X and Y FOVs will make 30 degrees, so we'll tighten them slightly. And then the size, we can make this 20 by 20, so 20 centimeters for both the X and Y sizes. And that sets up our P-storm, and we've got it ready to go. The next thing we can do is worry about the output, and we can just say particle birth for that. Just double click to make it bigger with the command key held down, and we can see it perfectly. Now, before we move on, we need to think about setting up some particle groups, and we actually need 3 of these. So we'll come up to our simulate menu here, thinking particles settings. Holding down the control key, we can click and we can say add, and we'll do this 3 times. So let's just add another group to there if we can. Another group, please. Add, that's it. And the same again, add. Okay, I've got my 3 groups. We'll colour them. So let's just make them in RGB. We'll make this one red. We'll make this one a yellow. And finally, we'll make this one cyan blue. And then we can rename them. Our first group will be called main. This will be the group that we're working with here to launch the actual fireworks into the air. Our second group we will call trail. And our third group, boom. So this group will allow us to have a trail of particles following the firework as it shoots into the sky. That will represent the smoke. And ultimately we'll use these particles to create our pyro smoke. And the boom, that will be when the firework explodes. So that's what we're doing with those three groups. Fantastic, so we've got it that far. The next thing we need to reach for is a P group node. Let's bring one of those in, so standard menu. That's what we want, P group. And the group, if we go into our simulate menu and then select thinking particles settings once again, we can say that we want the main group in this field here within the P group node, and then we can just connect this up. Fantastic, so we've got the first part of our thinking particles ready to go. If we just play the sequence, we can see that this has got much smaller. We've got a red particle here, which is what we should get. So our fireworks are all red particles. We'll just zoom out a fair way so that we can see what's going on. And we can see that these are being spat out at regular intervals. Okay, so that's working so far. The next thing we can worry about is a p-pass node, and we can start giving these particles some essential characteristics to make them behave like fireworks. So we'll bring in a p-pass node. Let's go down to thinking particles, initiate a p-pass. That's what we want. Now our group for the p-pass, once again, simulate settings, we can drag in our main group, drop that in there. So now we've got main in our p-pass. Fantastic. Now what we need to do is worry about some gravity. So we actually need to create a gravity object. So let's bring in another null. We'll drop it down here and we'll call this gravity. At the moment it isn't rotated correctly, but what we'll do is worry about working with that in a little minute. With our thinking particles, we'll bring in a dynamic gravity, p gravity. That's what we want. Now at the moment we've got nothing in the object field, so we need to drag the gravity null into there, and straight away now we've got it represented. But we can see, if we zoom in, that it's not pointing in the correct direction. It's currently pointing along the z-axis, so we need to rotate it. So select our gravity and we'll rotate this -90. And now it's pointing downwards, so the gravity will behave as we wish. And we can plumb our particles from the P storm via the P pass node. We can plumb them into the gravity like that. And now if we zoom out, we should find that we're getting particles that are starting to try to come back to Earth as they zoom away from the emitter. They should start to curve in the air. But we're not quite there, are we, at the moment? Nothing much is happening. Now let's have a look at our gravity. Right, at the moment we've got it set to a strength of 100. We're probably better off with a strength of 600. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, and we can see that they are starting to curve, can't we? Yes, they're behaving more like fireworks now. That's what we need to see. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's giving me the result that I want. We can leave everything else. Planar gravity is fine. The icon size, well, that doesn't really matter. We can change that if we want, or we can simply make it disappear. The decay, we don't need to worry about that. Mass dependence, size dependence, don't worry about it. Just leave those as they are. Okay, fantastic. So we've got the gravity in and we're starting to get some behavior that we want. Now, let's think where we're going from here, because at the moment we've got our main group actually set up and pretty much functioning the way we want it to. The next thing we need to worry about are both our trail and boom groups. We've got to set those two up. So what do we need to do? Well, for a start, we need 2 more P storms. So let's start by grabbing those in and setting them up. So once again, thinking particles, generator, P storm. I'll bring this one over here and just command drag to copy so that we've got 2. And they both need to be set up in slightly different ways. Now, this particular storm, I'm going to use this for the P trail, or the particle trail group. So that's going to be set up in a slightly different way, as I say, to the P storm down here for the boom group. What we need to do is bring in an emitter alignment on this particular P storm. And once again, at the output stage, we do need particle birth. So we've got that set up. Now, the emitter alignment, we're going to be using TP1 for that. Because if we don't, we'll find that when the trail is emitted from our particles here, the trail will actually go sideways. It will move along the z-axis. We don't want that. We want it to go straight downwards. So with our TP1 here, we need to set this up accordingly. Now, at the moment, it isn't rotated correctly. The way this is set up, it will still emit in the wrong way. We need to set this up -90. So again, it will point straight downwards and follow along this z-axis. So we'll bring that in, and we can now say global matrix, plumb that into our emitter alignment, and that's ready to go. We'll worry about the emitter position in a little while, but for now we'll work on the various parameters that we need to set up within the P storm. Once again, the type can be a circle. The birth type definitely count, but on this occasion we want 25 for our count value. The lifespan, we only want 20, a very short life, and we'll give it a variation of 40%. As speed, this can be 600 because they want to shoot out quite fast. And the speed variation, once again, I'm going to make 20%. The size, 1. The variation for the size I'll leave alone. And the X and Y FOVs both need to be just 3 degrees, so very, very tight for these, because after all, we want the trail to shoot out the back of the firework, technically, or the bottom of the firework, and just go downwards. That's effectively what we want. And then we can make these very tiny here too, so just 4 centimeters each. And that's it. We don't need to change anything else. So that's our second P storm set up and ready to go. Once again, we need to bring in a P group, so let's find one of those. Standard P group. And on this occasion, oops, don't want to do that. On this occasion, we want, from our thinking particles settings, our trail group dragged into here. And we can connect the particle birth. Excellent, so we've got it that far. The next thing we can do is worry about this emitter position. So in order to do that, we will bring in, from our thinking particles, we actually want a get data. So in the helpers, get data. And we can plumb the output from the main into the particle. And at the output stage, we want position. So we've got that there, and then we can simply connect the position out to the emitter position of the P storm. So now we should be getting a trail that follows our fireworks, and we can see that we are. So that's working okay. The next thing to do is worry about the age of these particles, because I want them to follow the firework until a split second before the thing explodes. So we'll bring in, from our thinking particles, a TP condition, and it will be a P age. Once again, we can connect the output of our P pass to the particle input, and then we need to set up the on output. So what we're going to do for a start is add an on port to our PStorm. Just drop that into the middle. Okay, so we're ready there. And then let's worry about this. Now, the type, it won't actually be born, it will be relative. And we will set relative T2 to 95%. So we want the trail to be active between 0 and 95%. Once we've got 95% of the way to exploding, basically, that's when we want the particles to shut down. So let's plumb that in there. So that bit is now dealt with. It'll be quite subtle, but it's dealt with. And that's as much as we need to do there. Moving on from here, I'm going to select all of these 3 objects and just move them up to 25. So they're all slightly above where the ground point is. And also I'm going to bring in a plane and I'm going to move this -50. So that there's a bit of distance between what will be the ground, because this plane is going to represent the actual ground, and our 3 null objects. For the next step, we'll make this plane editable, and that's now ready for us to use a little bit later on. The next thing to do is bring in another p-pass node. So we'll come down to thinking particles, initiator and p-pass. Once again, we need to go into our TP settings, and on this occasion we need to drag trail into the group field. We can then start thinking about what we're going to do next. Well, we want some gravity for a start, so we'll grab a hold of another gravity, so dynamic p gravity. Once again, we can drag our gravity null into the object field, and on this occasion we can leave all of the parameters as they are. We don't need to change anything. Everything is fine, so we can connect those two. And then finally we can bring in from our particle dynamics, once again we want a deflector, so we'll bring one of those in, place it up here and connect the trail output to the input. And on this occasion the object needs to be the plane that we've just created, so we can drop that in there. Now the deflector type will say object. The bounce will make 10% with a variation of 5, and that's as much as we need to change. Okay, so let's just play the sequence and see what happens. And we can see that our particles, when they're shooting out of the bottom of our fireworks, if we just change the view to a right hand view, we can see that they're shooting out and they are stopping when they hit the plane, and that's exactly what we want. Don't worry about these white particles here, they're just coming out of this P-storm. That's all that is. We haven't set that up yet. But if we just switch back to our 3D view, we can now see that our fireworks are working really nicely. So yeah, that's giving us the result that we want. Fantastic. So we've got our trail group completely set up now, and we can move on to our last P-storm and get this one set up, and this will be our boom group. Okay, so let's work on this. For a start, we need to add an on port at the input stage. Once again, particle birth at the output stage. We've got that ready to go. Now, our emitter position, once again, we can take that from our get data. We can just plumb that into there. We'll command drag to create another pH, connect the output from the main into the particle input, and then we're ready to set this one up. Now this just needs to be set to die, because when our particles die, or it'll be our particle that represents our firework, when that dies we want this to explode. So that's what we want to happen. We want the boom group to do its job and make the thing explode. Okay, fantastic. We can then think about where we're going next, and we may as well connect the on to the on of the P-storm. That gets that ready to go, and then we can think about what we're doing with the P-storm and set the parameters up for this. As per usual, it will be a circle and the birth type will be a count. Now the number of particles will be 3000 on this occasion, so we want a lot of particles. Our life will make 30. The variation 40. The speed this time 800 with a variation of 20%. The size, once again, I will make 1. We won't do anything with the size variation. And the X FOV and Y FOV on this occasion will both be 360 because we want the particles to emit in absolutely any direction. And then finally, we can set the X and Y sizes to 4 centimeters once again. And that completes the setup for the particle storm. We can command drag to copy this particle group, and once again with our simulate thinking particles TP settings, we can drag in the boom group this time into the field and just make sure that that's set up as the P group, and we can see that it's here, and then we can simply connect this up. With that done, we can now think about bringing in yet another P pass. Again, we'll bring this one in, just command drag to copy. Could have left this window open really, just bring the settings back in. We'll just leave it up here. And once again, we can drag the boom group into here, or we can drag it into the group field if we wish, but we'll do that. And then it's finally a case of bringing in a gravity node. And in this particular instance, when it comes to our gravity settings, I think we can leave them exactly as they are. I don't think we need to change anything there, but we'll just leave it there for the minute, and we'll have a quick test, see what we've got, and see if we're getting something that actually resembles a firework exploding. Let's see if we do. Oh yes, that's working quite nicely. I think we need to give ourselves a few more frames, so we'll make it 1,000 for what it is, and let's see what we get. Yeah, really nice. So they're all working exactly as we'd like them to. Beautiful. Okay, fantastic. So we could leave it there and say that we've got the Expresso and the thinking particles all set up, but what we will do is add some particle shapes to a couple of our particle groups. We don't want the trail to have a shape, but the main and the boom we do. So that's going to be our next port of call. We can shut this down now, so we'll get rid of the TP settings. We just need to bring in a couple of spheres, so we'll bring one in, just drop it here, and then command drag to copy. Call this one main and this one trail, or rather boom I should say. Boom. Okay, so both of these essentially can be just 3 centimeters in radius. That's as much as we need to do with them really. So we've got those two ready to go. We can give them textures. You know, I'll leave that to you, I think, for what it is, but if you wish to go in here and create some textures, then that's absolutely fine, but I'll leave that for now. So we've got our 2 shapes. If we just bring this back over here, we need 2P shape nodes, so we'll bring those in. They're just standard P shape. We've got one there, and we'll copy another one over to here. Connect the output of the main to there, and then this will be the main sphere that we need to drop into there. Bounding radius, we can just make that 0 so that we get the same size for our particle shape. This one again, we'll make the bounding radius 0, and we'll drag in the boom sphere. Just connect this up. Now before we do any kind of test, we've got one more thing to do. We need to come to simulate thinking particles TP geometry. We actually need 2 of these, so we'll just place them under the Expresso, get another one. Now our first, the particle group, and we need our settings once again. Our particle group will need to be main. Bring that into there. And our second particle group will be boom. So we'll bring that one into there. And the TP geometries are now both set up, or at least they should be. in the correct way. We've got main in there and we've got boom in there. The subgroups, we can just uncheck those. We don't need to worry about them. We've got no subgroups. Right, let's see if we get a result. Yep, we can see that we've got an explosion there. In fact, we'll hit H and we'll just go back to viewing our whole scene. Yeah, I mean, we are getting the result that we want. If we zoom in closer, we can see that we've got our red tick there and we've got a sphere associated with it. And if we go up here, we can see again we've got blue ticks and we've got spheres associated with them. So that is all working as it needs to, which is great. Fantastic. So we've got that far. The next port of call for us, and we'll close the Expresso down for now. The next port of call will be to bring in another TP geometry. So we'll bring this one in, but we won't do anything with this for the moment. We'll just clear it out and leave it there. We'll bring in a tracer object. Let's get one of those and bring that in. Once again, we'll just drop it under the geometry there. And our trace link, we don't need TP geometry 2. We need to change that, and it needs to be our boom group. So we want TP settings once again, and we'll drop the boom group in there. Now, the sample step and trace paths, absolutely fine. The tracing mode, that's fine. Trace active is fine. We won't bother with vertices. We're not using those. That's all fine there. What we need to change here, though, we need to say from end, and then we can decide the amount that we want to trace. I found that 3 was good, but you can set this to your own taste. The type, I prefer a cubic spline and uniform for the intermediate points. So that's the way I like to set this up. Let's just give this a run and see what we get. And we can see that we're getting some nice little trails left behind our points. And now I think we're getting something that really does look like a burst from a firework, doesn't it? It gives us quite a pleasant result, and I think it just rounds everything off and just gives us a really pleasing look. So yeah, I'm happy with that. What I'll do with the tracer as well in the basic here, just give it a colour and make it yellow. Just to make it stand out a little bit more, click off of it, and then we'll see what we get now. And there we go. We've got yellow trails. Yeah, I mean, I think that looks quite nice. So I think we'll leave it at that for the tracer. And now we can worry about this geometry here and what we're going to be doing with it. Well, this is where we reach for Pyro. So in our TP Geometry 2, in the Object tab, we need a particle group, and we need that to be our trail group. So we'll grab a hold of that and drag it in. Puts that in there. Now, in order to turn the trail into smoke, we simply need to give the TP Geometry 2 a Pyro tag. So let's bring that in, Pyro emitter. And if we just run the sequence, let's just see what happens. And straight away we can see that it's working. And it is bringing in some Pyro into the scene. What I'm also going to do, actually, I will, with my settings here, I'll just set this to none. So that way we don't see any ticks anymore. But you can see this is creating Pyro. It's a little bit too intense though at the moment. These look like sort of larger rockets taking off. We don't want that. So we'll need to do some work. Now the thickness is the first thing we can work with. Just make that 8. Just make it a little bit smaller. Now the density set we can leave at 0, and the density add I'm just going to make that 1. And finally down here, temperature set, make it much lower, make it 480, or rather 580, I beg your pardon. So 580 in there, and about 110 I found was okay for the temperature add. Everything else you can leave the same. So I haven't gone crazy with the settings for this. I mean, if you wish to and experiment a lot more, then please do. But for the sake of the tutorial, I think this will demonstrate this well enough. So let's just run the sequence now. And we can see that there's a lot less going on with that now. It looks much more akin to what you'd expect to see coming out of a firework. And let's just follow it through. It'll bang, and there you go. And we can see the trail gradually starts to disappear. That smoke gradually fades out, exactly as you would expect it to with a firework. So yeah, that's all looking really quite pleasant on the eye, isn't it? And working nicely. I mean, obviously it slows things down quite a lot. The fireworks are certainly not moving as fast as they were. And of course I am recording, so you know that will also slow things down. But you can see, I mean, they've increased the core speed. The actual speed of the timeline is certainly a lot better in 2024 than it was in release 2023 for Cinema 4D. I mean, it's quite remarkable, you know, what it's actually doing here, you know, and the speed that it is maintaining, given that I'm recording as well. But yeah. So there you go. That's really nice. Now there's one last thing that I want to show you. Just one thing that I think will just really enhance this nicely, and that's using a sound effect. So what we'll do, we'll just click this open, and we're going to use this pH. So on the death, as soon as this is triggered, we want a nice sound effect, a nice bang. So in order to make that work, what we need is two nodes. We need a sound node, which is pretty obvious. So we'll bring one of those in, and we need to put a file in here. Now let's have a look and see what I've got. If I just get rid of screen flow for a minute, I do have a couple of firework explosion sounds here. I'll bring in this particular one. I'll just drag this into the field there and drop that in. So we've got our sound effect set up, and I will put a link to the company that I got this sound effect from. I can't remember their name offhand, but I'll put a link to them in the show notes as a recognition that I got the sound from them, which is what they like you to do. And these sounds are royalty free if you're not making any money out of the use that you're putting them to. So it's absolutely fine to use them. So I've got my sound. I just need to give this a play port. Now the temptation would be to just plumb this into here. That won't work. Okay, this works in a bit of a strange way. What you've got to do is bring in a logic compare and just leave it as it is. You would think, I mean, this actually outputs a bool value, so it's either true or false. You can see there it says bool. It's true or false. Now you would expect we would need a true output in order to make this work, and yeah, that would make logical sense, but that won't work for this. If we just plumb this into here and then plumb this into the sound, we'll get the result that we want. But if I said equal to 1 in here, thinking 1 as a true value, won't work, which I find very, very strange, but that's the way it is. Let's just play this through. There we go. We get a sound effect at the beginning. Just if you do that, just bring it back to 0, bring your timeline back to 0 and play again, and you won't get that. But let's see what happens. Beautiful. Yeah, and I think that really does just basically sells it really nicely, doesn't it? That's the sort of cherry on top of the cake, just adding that sound effect. Yeah, very, very good. But as I say, let's just try this out. I mean, if I put 1 in there, and let's see what happens. So we run back from now. And when it explodes, we don't get a sound. Isn't that bizarre? That really is bizarre. It's the direct opposite of what you'd expect it to be. But mine is not to reason why. That's the way it works. And that completes the expression. That's as much Expresso as you need to do to make all of this work. And if you combine it with a tracer, just to give you a little bit of more interest here. And of course, if you wish to render this tracer, all you need to do is go into your tags, render tags, and just make it an RS object. That's the first thing you need to do. And then the mode, you can make it hair strands. That's the option that you need to choose. And then with this, what I did was just drag this down here and then do this so that you get a reduction in thickness over the length of the strand. And that makes it look really nice, I found. And of course, if you wish to see the Pyro, you've got to create basically a Pyro volume in here. Come down here, create Pyro volume, and then drop this onto the Pyro output, and then you'll see the Pyro in the renderer. But anyway, I'm not going to go into rendering. I'm going to leave that to you. But have a good play around. If you wish to create some textures for your main and your boom spheres, have a play around, see what you can come up with. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show you in this tutorial. So that just about brings us to the end of this one. So as always, I really hope you've enjoyed doing this tutorial and that it's inspired you and given you some ideas for some things that you might be able to incorporate in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course, ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please do share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.